Welcome in YouTube to DJ Deliberations on Dying Light Part 2. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, hit that sub button. If you haven't seen, we do have a playlist specifically for the deliberations that we do videos on games that we play. I always start them right after I finish them, so that way it's a little more fresh in my mind. And if you watched the last episode all the way through, you kind of heard where I'm gonna go. So first of all, it is a 9 game. All in right now, you can get it on Steam for $100. That's base game plus the DLC. I think it comes with a few extras in there. We played it for what was it again? Like 8 hours, 89, 90 hours. We did, and we got most of the achievements done. We might go back and knock out a couple more because we are pretty close on completing those. So Dying Light 1, again, I did a little comparison in the last episode, in the game, watching the credits. Dying Light 1 versus Dying Light 2. Dying Light 1, the crafting of the weapons are easier to get, a lot more OP. Dying Light 1, you have repairs on weapons. Everybody drop weapons. We're really going to feel like you're not going to have a weapon, right? Might not be the best thing in the world, but you're going to have one. And you know, if you fight a few people, that you're going to get one again. So, plus you have guns and whatnot in part 1. Part 2, especially for like the first, for me, for the first like 2/3 of the game, really felt like I felt very lucky to have weapons, and I was very careful on my choosing what battles to fight because I did not want to a lot of durability on those weapons, because it didn't feel like I was going to get that many replacements for it. So based on that, and plus you do not have the ability in part 2, not be able to repair in part 2 as of this recording. Maybe they'll put it in eventually, but as of right now, you cannot repair your weapon. Part 2, very clear. Also, you cannot craft weapons. You can craft mods, attach it to certain weapons, but you cannot craft and you cannot repair weapons in part 2. So early on, especially, make sure you're choosing your battles, and make sure you're constantly running around the map to those different areas where you can get like beehive, flowers, feathers, resin, stuff like that. Making sure you're picking up those, even though it's common, uncommon, common, gray one. Even though it's gray, pick it up and make sure you have it. Frustrating thing was towards the end of the game, things were not leveling with me. Like I was level 8, but the stuff I was picking up was level 6. So I did find some military drops, and those had level 8 and 9 items in it, so that helped. The store also was selling level 8 items, so that helped. But again, especially when you're doing the story, you figure you're going to get rewarded. It did say when I was after the credits rolled and it continued, it did say that things would now level with me. So perhaps like the stuff that was level 6 will be level 8. There's a lot of, so another difference is in part 1 there's no choice, no choosing like your dialogue and really what direction you want to go. Part 2, there's a lot of choices. There is a dialogue tree. I think everyone does have a dialogue, and you can choose to either go with the yellow route, which is just get to the point, or you can get more backstory if you want. It's pretty cool indeed. Also, it does feel like you have to make specific choices. Spoiler alert, you do have to pick either going with survivors or the peacekeepers. We went with the peacekeepers, just because I knew it was going to be better combat stuff. And again, I felt like I needed it more early than the survival stuff, which is more parkour. So and each one does have it. You can tell by the way the story is going, it does have an impact on the actual story itself. I do feel like both were well written. Felt like the scripts were good. I felt like the stories were good, and I think the acting was good. That's my opinion. I know some people did not like the story of part 2. I had no problem with it. I felt like it was a little more coherent all the way through than part 1. Part 1, I think, went wayward a little bit. Just my opinion. And I felt like it was pretty straightforward. Again, part 2, at least you had like the choices and whatnot on how to get to that end point. The DLC didn't make me really want to play it yet. Maybe I will. I played a little bit of it. It just didn't capture me. But we might go in, do it. There's a couple of achievements for it. But again, this is the first DLC. Typically, Techland has a pretty broad plan. Like, you're not going to see Dying Light 3 for like another 3-4 years. So we've seen with both, they are willing, not just willing, they are constantly putting new things into the game. They call them events. So even in part 1, you get events, which is pretty cool. So I feel like it's worth picking up, especially now, because it's still new. It's only a year old at this point. However, if you don't have $100 to spend, Dying Light 1 usually goes on sale for the whole kit and caboodle, like it and all of its DLC, for $10. And if you can get it for $10, definitely get it, because we spent 66 hours in that game, and we didn't really. We still have to do the following, which is going to be probably 5-10 hours of additional time. So if you can get it for $10, that's a pretty good value. Again, 9 out of 10 for Dying Light 2, 9 out of 10 for Dying Light Part 1. I felt like Dying Light 1 felt more polished. Again, though, I'm playing it 7 years after it's been released, so obviously it should be polished. This Dying Light 2 did feel like there were parts mechanically. Like, I felt like I got stuck on ladders sometimes and on buildings, and I couldn't like release and get the same fluid movement that I did in part 1. And I know other people came in my chat and said the exact same thing. So hopefully that gets patched. It's a little thing. It's not. It doesn't happen often. It just happens often enough that you kind of remember. The city is so much bigger in part 2. Old Villador and then the central loop, especially the central loop, is huge. The metro systems are nice. For getting around the system, getting around the map. For sure. A lot of the same enemies from part 1 are in part 2. You have your volatiles. I mean, you have the virals, the volatiles. You do have some boomers. This one had howlers, which is pretty good. The chase in this one is pretty intense, especially when you get to chase level 3 or 4, because then you start getting the volatiles. However, it gets to a point where like they're not that difficult, right? But maybe in future patches they put more of them out at night, because if you remember in part 1, like they're everywhere. You really can't go very far without seeing them, and especially when you get to a certain level in part 1, you get the alpha volatiles, which are like hardcore. Will kill you very quickly. It doesn't feel like that in this one. Even at night, it didn't feel like there was very many volatiles out until you got to chase level 3, and then chase level 4, it felt like everything was a volatile. But at a certain point, like, you've leveled past them, so it's not like a huge problem. Overall, the movement is pretty good. There was, again, a couple of little issues. There is a little bit of lag, again, maybe because the central loop is so big that sometimes it has a hard time rendering. The game is spectacular, though, to like just stop and look around. because the attention to detail, even when you're underwater at one point, going through that city, it's amazing how much detail they put into that. You can tell they checked like almost every piece of the map, right? Make sure it was pretty crisp. So yeah, I do recommend this, especially if you're a zombie fan. If you liked part 1, you'll like part 2. If nothing else, to just mess around, go around in the city, killing things, parkouring around. The parkour is much more needed, I feel like, especially early in this one than part 1, where you want to stick to the roofs as much as possible. Stay away from the renegades as well as the zombies. It is nice to see like the renegades and the zombies fight. Nice little touch. Yeah, and there's other things I could say, but I feel like the challenges in part 1 were better than the challenges in part 2. I really didn't feel like playing them in this one, as opposed to part 1. I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a couple, and like they hooked me. I was like, oh, these are fun. Let me do them. I tried this one. I was just like, no, not for me. But yeah. The grappling hook. I wish it was more like part 1. Part 1's grappling hook was amazing. Being able to go from the street to the roof. This one you can't do that, at least not that I'm aware of. There might be a way to do it, but not really. But the anomalies, the quarantine areas are fun. I didn't really hang out in the hollows. I feel like once you do one, you kind of, they're all the same. Same thing with the I feel like you level past the convoys at some point. Maybe not, but it kind of felt that way. Yeah, so overall pretty good. As more content comes out for the game, I definitely will be doing more. I hope something else comes out this year, more story based, like DLC kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be this. It could be like a side thing, maybe like more on the Night Runners. Maybe they go back in time and show Frank and his crew and take on in that little piece that they kind of touch on in this story. So they could do something like that for sure. So that's my 2 cents on it. I hope you all enjoyed the series. If you have played Dying Light, or if you're thinking about it, just let me know in the comments section, like what's going on, what do you think, and we can have a little conversation. But again, thank you everyone. Stay awesome. Go ahead and hit that like button and hit that sub button if you haven't already. Talk to you later, YouTube. Bye bye.